Hey, Thrive Loud listeners, Lou Diamond here. Want to upgrade your business and your life? Make 2020 amazing and end 2019 powerfully? Then attend the 14th Annual Smart Hustle Growth Conference in New York City on October 25th. Produced by Ramon Ray, entrepreneur, author, global speaker, and Thrive Loud alum, the Smart Hustle Conference is built for business owners to learn how to scale and grow their business. This incredible day brings together Mark Levy, Simon Sinek's brand coach, Josh Cohen, founder of Junk Luggers, John Janch of Duct Tape Marketing, and many more. Head on over to www.smarthustle.com/conference and get 20% off with the discount code THRIVE. Again, that's October 25th in New York City in the heart of Times Square, spending a day with other business owners to encourage and learn from each other. Network, learn, and be inspired at the 14th Annual Smart Hustle Growth Conference in New York City.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you an important announcement. Thrive Loud is officially the best podcast ever. And Lou Diamond is still bald. That is all.
It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, we have writer, consultant, and teacher about the intersection of psychology, technology, and business. His most recent book, Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life, has dubbed him the prophet of habit-forming technology. In addition to his nirandfar.com blog, his writing has been featured in the Harvard Business Review, TechCrunch, and Psychology Today. Angel investor and very fun guy, Nir Eyal is on Thrive Loud today. Nir, how are you?
I'm doing great, Lou. Thanks so much for having me.
This is long overdue. We're going to give kudos to former guests on the show who've been saying, dude, you got to get Nir on your program. He's so ideal for this. And I'm like, you know what? We really do. And I've been running around like a chicken without a head. And I am very excited today because I have been distracted by my devices in all of my life.
Welcome to the modern world, my friend.
So I want to kind of rewind the clock a little bit to find out how this has been, I guess, your focus of late, and understand. We'll talk about some of the things that you've kind of solved within this, but I want to understand how you've identified that this is one of the problems that you're helping to solve.
Yeah, I mean, who hasn't felt distracted? I mean, let's just say a disclaimer right now. I mean, if you don't struggle with distraction, if you do everything it is that you say you're going to do day in and day out, then this might not be the podcast episode or the book for you.
No chance. This is Thrive Loud. This is exactly how they are.
But stay tuned if you are the kind of person, as I was. I mean, let me be very honest with you. I was patient zero for this course of study. I mean, I wanted to know, why didn't I do what I said I'm going to do? It drove me nuts, right? And it's especially in this age when distraction is so easy to come across, right? That if you are looking for distraction, then certainly distraction you will find, because technology has become so pervasive and persuasive. It means that if you're looking for it, you're going to find distraction in one way or the other. Now, that doesn't mean distraction is an insurmountable problem. It's not even a new problem. In fact, Plato talked about it 2,500 years ago. He called it akrasia. So 2,500 years ago, people were saying how distracting the world is these days. So it's not a new problem, but what is new is the fact that we have these new devices that make it so easy to get distracted. So when I found that I was getting distracted from what I wanted to do in life, whether that was, I wanted to work out and I wouldn't. I wanted to spend quality time with my daughter and I would be on my phone. I would sit down to work and say, okay, now I'm definitely going to do the thing I plan to do. And yet somehow I would constantly get distracted. And so I wanted to know, why wasn't I doing the things I myself said and wanted to do? And I figured if I could crack that nut, then that would be a superpower, right? So that's why Indistractable sounds like indestructible, because I really do believe it's a superpower that if you can simply live with personal integrity, you become very valuable in the workplace. You are able to achieve your goals, and you live a much more fulfilled life because you stop lying to yourself, right? I constantly lied to myself and said I would do one thing while doing another. Well, now I'm the kind of person who strives to do what they say they're going to do. I live with personal integrity because I am indistractable.
Nir, I'm looking at my desktop right now as we speak. For those listeners out here, we're recording this via the internet and across the super information highway. I've got alerts flashing on my right. I've obviously got the podcast application up here, which is detailing our conversation, and our clock on the left. I've got a phone on the bottom right, which has buzzed 3 times, but on silent mode the last time we've been here. Emails that have come in. I also have an agenda that's popping up that's saying what I have coming up to do today. Just the environment I'm living in digitally is trying to distract me. How do I get hold of that?
Well, the first thing is to start by defining what is distraction. Okay. And so to understand what distraction is, we have to understand what it is not. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. Both come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And both words end in the same 6 letters, action, A-C-T-I-O-N. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you want to do, okay, things that you do with intent. The opposite of traction is distraction, any action you do that pulls you away from what you plan to do with intent. So first and foremost, we should stop saying this moral hierarchy of, oh, you playing Candy Crush or you playing a video game or whatever, or social media, that's somehow morally inferior to me watching football on TV. No, that's ridiculous. They're both pastimes. There's nothing wrong with either of them as long as you do them in accordance with your values and spend the time the way you want. So my job isn't to be some holier than thou tech Luddite that says stop playing video games, stop using social media. That's ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with those things if you do them on your schedule as opposed to somebody else's. So that's a very important trait. The other thing we need to realize is that, many times we get sucked into what I call pseudo work. Pseudo work is when you feel like you're doing the right thing, you feel like you're making traction, but really it's a distraction. So here's what would happen to me almost every day before I became Indistractable. I would sit down at my desk and I said, okay, I'm going to work on that big project right now. I'm going to finish that chapter. I'm going to do those slides. I'm going to do that thing I've been putting off. I'm finally going to do it today. Today's the day. Right after I check email, right after I check that Slack channel, or let me just do that one thing I've been meaning to do. And that is just as much of a pernicious distraction because you don't even realize you've gotten distracted. But by definition, anything that you do that is not what you planned to do is a distraction. So you got traction to the right, you got distraction to the left. Now, what prompts us to either traction or distraction? Only 2 things: triggers. Now, there are 2 types of triggers, external triggers and internal triggers. External triggers are what you mentioned earlier, the pings, the dings, the rings, the visual clutter, people who interrupt you, anything in your environment that prompts you to either traction or distraction. Now, these triggers aren't necessarily bad. If a trigger prompts you to do something you wanted to do, now it's moving you towards traction, right? So if your alarm clock rings and you meant to get up in the morning so you could go to the gym early, well, now that's moving you towards traction. That's terrific. But if you get a notification on your phone while you're with your kids or you're having dinner with your spouse or whatever it might be that you wanted to do, work on that big project at work, if it's moving you towards something you didn't want to do, now it's moving you towards distraction. Mm-hmm. So the idea here is not to just blame these things, blanket blame, because all of these tools are super helpful. We don't want to excise them from our life. We need these tools. So that's why I don't buy into this whole digital detox thing. It's ridiculous for most people. They can't afford to stop using these tools. We rely upon them for our livelihood. Instead, what we want to do is to realize that we can put them in their place, that we can get the best out of them without letting them get the best of us. So as bad as these external triggers might be, let me just tell you, what's much more common as a source of distraction are not the external triggers, but in fact, the internal triggers.
Okay.
Most distraction
here. I'm looking forward to this. Keep going.
Yeah. So most distraction starts from within. Why? Because if we're going to answer this question of why do we get distracted, let's go really to first principles. Why do we do anything? What's the nature of human motivation? Turns out the nature of human motivation, the reason we do everything we do, most people will tell you, if you ask them, they would say it's some version of carrots and sticks, right? The pursuit of pleasure, the avoidance of pain. This is called Freud's pleasure principle. Unfortunately, it's not true. That it's not true that we're motivated by pleasure and the avoidance of pain, but in fact, it's pain all the way down. That everything we do It's called the homeostatic response. Everything we do is about a desire to escape discomfort. So even the pursuit of something pleasurable is itself a craving, a wanting, desire. There's a reason we say love hurts. It is psychologically destabilizing to want something. And that discomfort is what prompts us to act. So that means if all behavior is prompted by a desire to escape discomfort, that means that time management is pain management. So just think about it, right? If you're lonely, check Facebook. If you're uncertain, you Google. If you're stressed, check email. If you're bored, you go to Reddit or YouTube, stock prices, sports scores, whatever it might be. All of these things cater to psychological needs. And so we have to admit to ourselves that the reason we use these devices, the reason we keep getting distracted by one thing or another, as humans have always been distracted for the past 2,500 years, is for psychological escape. If you sit down at your desk and you can't do your work, it's not your computer that's at fault. If you can't sit down with your kids without taking out your phone, I got news for you. It ain't your phone. There's something else going on in your life, as there was for me in my life, that I was looking to escape from. And it wasn't until we deal with that fact that we can actually conquer distraction.
Nir, may I go into what was going on inside of you that was making you more distracted?
Yeah. So what was happening with me is that from the success of my first book, when I wrote my first book, nobody was calling me. I got no emails. I was an unknown author, and I self-published Hooked, and there was nothing going on. It was just me writing. And so, ironically, and it's a high class problem, but it's a problem nonetheless. The more folks started to use my methodology, the more calls I got, the more inquiries, the more problems there were. And I didn't know how to deal with that, right? I didn't have anybody helping me. It was just me. And between all these speaking engagements and consulting work and, people kind of asking for my time, having a cup of coffee here and a discussion there and helping a friend, do a favor here, it's very stressful. And so I didn't have a way to cope with it. I would just respond to everything as it came in. And the thing that made me successful, and that my research and my writing is what helped me, get to where I was, I didn't do anymore because I was inundated with all the stuff I had to respond to. And if I'm really honest with you, it was the stress, it was the anxiety that I didn't cope with in a healthy way. And so who paid the price? Well, I paid the price. I didn't exercise. I didn't take care of my health. I wasn't doing the writing I knew I needed to do. And even when I was with my daughter, there was one particular occasion when I remember I was with my daughter and we had this afternoon together. Finally, we had some daddy-daughter time together. And I remember we had this book of activities that daddies and daughters could do together. And one of the activities in the book was to ask each other this question, that if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember the question verbatim, but I can't tell you what she said. Because when she answered, I was on my device.
Wow.
I was looking at some stupid thing on my phone. And she got the hint that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was. And she left the room. And I didn't even see her walk out. But when I looked up from my phone, I realized that she was gone. And this is, if I'm really honest with you, it didn't just happen once. It happened on multiple occasions. In fact, I told somebody this story, and he asked his daughter about what superpower she would want. And she said she'd want the power to talk to animals. And he said, well, why would you want to talk to animals? She said, because when you and mommy are on your phones, I want someone to talk to.
Oh, and literally like the knife inside to the heart, dagger to the middle. Oh, okay.
And it's true. It's true. We want these devices. They're fantastic. And let's stop blaming them. It's not their fault. It's not your fault either.
Right.
But it is our responsibility. These things aren't going away. So if we don't learn to deal with them, as opposed to boo-hoo-hooing about big bad tech melting all our brains, let's do something about the problem as opposed to all this moaning.
Let's do something about the problem, Nir. Give our listeners a little bit of, and not all the answers because you've written a book about it, but I want to hear some of the steps that have helped you get off of that device and be more, I guess, attracted as opposed to distracted. I think I did I got your whole English lesson and Latin lesson, and I totally failed that. But anyway.
So we have the four basic elements of the Indistractable model. So we've got traction, distraction, internal triggers, external triggers. So now we're just going to work our way around. So the first step, the most important step, is to master the internal triggers. That we need tactics. We need to learn these techniques to make sure that when we experience an uncomfortable emotional state, whether it's loneliness, boredom, fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety, whatever it might be, we need to learn how to cope with that discomfort in a healthier manner. And I'm not talking about meditation. That's been written about ad nauseum. It's a great technique if you use it. I don't talk about meditation in the book. What I do talk about are tactics from acceptance and commitment therapy, as well as learning how to play things so that they don't become so taxing. Yeah. And then finally, how we can reimagine our temperament. That it turns out that we have so many self-limiting beliefs. Principal among them is this idea that willpower is a limited resource. And this idea got a lot of play when there was a researcher that wrote a book about this, and he argued that that willpower is a limited resource, that you run out of willpower. It's called ego depletion, kind of like gas in a gas tank. And so in my life, I would come home every night and say, "Oh, honey, I've had such a hard day today. No more willpower. I'm spent." And so how can I possibly say no to that pint of Ben & Jerry's in the freezer? How can I say no to watching Netflix and sitting on the couch? And that's what I would do day in and day out because I was spent. I deserved it. And it turns out that that's an excuse. It's not real. There is no such thing as ego depletion. That other studies have found that line of study could not replicate, except for, and this study was done by Carol Dweck at Stanford. Carol Dweck found that there is one group of people who are actually, who do experience what's called ego depletion. They do actually run out of willpower like it's a depletable resource. And that group of people only are people who believe that willpower is a limited resource.
So all we need to do is not believe it.
That's right. That's right. And it's the same story that we're hearing right now in the media about how tech is addictive and it's hijacking your brain and there's nothing you can do about it because of the algorithms. It's ridiculous because when we believe it, it becomes true. We're not talking about heroin here. We're not freebasing Facebook. We're not injecting Instagram here. Let's get real. And so what we need to do is to change our temperament. That's the part of the first step around mastering your internal triggers is to reimagine the trigger, reimagine the task, and reimagine our temperament. I'm giving you just, flyover highlights.
No, very, very helpful. Keep going.
The second step is to make time for traction. That it turns out that only 2/3 of Americans keep any sort of a calendar. But here's the joke here. How can we possibly call something a distraction when we don't know what it distracted us from?
Right.
We can't. Which means we got to start planning our day. If you have huge swaths of white space in your day, you know what's going to happen. You're going to get distracted. Yep. Your kids are going to take up your time. Your boss is going to eat up that time. Whatever's happening in the news is going to eat up that time unless you account for it, unless you decide in advance what it is you want to do for every minute of your day. It sounds difficult. It's not. It takes about 20, 30 minutes. And now you can revise that schedule in the future so that you can look at it and say, oh, now I know the difference between traction and distraction. Traction is anything that's on my calendar that I plan to do. Even if it's time to take a walk, time to meditate, time to paint, whatever it is you want to do, it's on my schedule. And anything that is not planned for is a distraction. I'll actually give you a link for the show notes about a free tool that I built that can help people do this. It takes maybe 20 minutes or so, and you'll have this schedule that you can use week after week to know the difference between traction and distraction. So that's step 2.
Well, I'll jump in the middle here, Nir. I'll let you know as I'm looking at my schedule. I believe this philosophy tremendously. I have items in my calendar that you would not believe anyone could possibly have. Literally, not only just work out on the elliptical or certain workouts at 6 a.m. I even have, update the sales pipeline at 8, social media specific time. I actually put bathroom time into the calendar. You're going to make fun of me.
Okay, that's a step beyond. I'm impressed there.
But the point here is this, is that in my life, if it's not on the calendar, it isn't going to happen or it never happened. Because I have to abide by that because I know that I can be easily distracted. Continue going on to point 3.
No, that's fantastic. And this is, by the way, 20, 30-year-old research. This has been around for a long time. It's so important to do because now you can also synchronize your schedule with your employees, with your manager, with your household members. You can synchronize your schedule. This technique will revolutionize your life. Believe me. The next step is to hack back these external triggers. So we know that these devices, these technologies, they are designed to hack your attention. And we want them to. We want them to be engaging. We want things to be user-friendly. That also means as a byproduct, sometimes all of these pings and dings don't serve us. So it turns out that 2/3 of people with a smartphone never change their notification settings. I don't want to hear about you getting distracted if you haven't taken a few minutes to change those damn notification settings. Why should every app be able to interrupt your time with your family, with your friends? They shouldn't. So we need to take a few minutes to hack back our phones, hack back our computers, and I show you exactly how to do this. It takes almost no time. That's kindergarten stuff. The much more important stuff has to do with other environments in our life. How do you hack back email? How do you hack back meetings? I show you exactly how. And one of the most pernicious forms of distraction is the open floor plan office. We get so many distractions from people just walking around. Hey, did you hear about the gossip? What did you think about the game last night? On your schedule, that's wonderful. If you want to go to the water cooler or have lunch with someone and chit chat, wonderful. But when you're in the middle of a big project, it's incredibly distracting. So every copy of Indistractable comes with a screen sign. It's this piece of cardstock in the middle of the book. You pull it out of the book. It's this bright red paper. You fold it into thirds and you put it on your computer monitor so that when you have time in your schedule to be indistractable, to do that focus work, your colleagues know because you have a sign on your computer that says, hey, I'm indistractable right now. Please come back later. And I know somebody out there is listening and thinking, well, that's why I use headphones, right? I put on headphones and now everybody knows that I'm not to be bothered. No, they don't. They think you're watching YouTube.
Well played.
Okay. So let's make it explicit. Let's tell everybody, no, it's okay to say, please don't bother me right now. That's totally fine, right? That's not that weird. That's something that we all need to build that skill because look, to do your best work, you need to do focused work in order to be your best.
Nir, I'm going to jump into this point here and I intentionally want to distract you from this part of the conversation because I want to know about you because we're learning about you, obviously very intelligent, very smart, really methodical in figuring out all these pieces. And you're killing it on a whole different bunch of levels. But I want to understand you for a second. As you were coming up with these ideas or you were coming up with your ways to retrain your brain, can you talk a little bit about maybe when you've slipped back, specifically in those early parts as you were developing it? Like, I don't want to say it was a matter of you picking up the phone again with your daughter, but maybe certain things. How would you fight yourself when you're being pulled back into those moments of distraction?
Yeah, so becoming indistractable doesn't mean you never get distracted. It's a made-up word, and so I get to define it any way I want because I made up the word. So the definition of distraction is not that you never get distracted. The definition of becoming indistractable is you are the kind of person who strives to do what they say they're going to do. Okay, it's about living with personal integrity. So I get distracted every day. Yep. But here's the difference. When I get distracted, I know why I got distracted, so I can do something about the problem. You know, there's that line that insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over again, right, expecting different results. Well, half my to-do list used to be recycled from one day to the next, to the next, to the next. It's maddening. Why do we do that? Instead, now I know why I got distracted, and I revise my schedule for the week ahead to accommodate for those reasons. So when we slip off track, we can look at our calendar and say, okay, how can we fix it? Because there's only 3 reasons we ever get distracted. Either it's an external trigger, an internal trigger, or a planning problem. And so the idea is to iterate. You never finish becoming indistractable. It's just like you never finish becoming creative, right? It's the ability to be creative that helps you excel at your work or excel at whatever it is you want to do. And the same goes for becoming indistractable. We have to allow ourselves to slip up. That's part of the process. And in fact, we know that people who are more self-compassionate are more likely to achieve their long-term goals. The idea is to say, okay, it happens, but now I know why. It's either a planning problem, an internal trigger, an external trigger. How am I going to revise my schedule or the tools I have in my toolkit to deal with these external triggers or internal triggers so that it doesn't keep happening again in the future?
Nir, I'm curious. You're an awesome dude. You've got it all together. You've got your books going, and obviously you're usually thriving each day. On the days you're having a little bit of trouble, what personal practice do you seek or person that you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
Yeah. So, there's 2 things that we can do. Big picture, there's 2 things we can do with our internal triggers, these uncomfortable emotional states. Either we can fix the source of the problem, or we can find ways to cope with that discomfort in a healthier manner. So if it's the source of the problem, sometimes I'm not really sure what the source of the problem is, if it's a systemic problem. So I'll have a conversation with my wife or with a good friend, just trying to figure out, okay, how do I fix this problem so it doesn't keep happening again in the future? And then when it comes to these tactics to cope with the discomfort, here I have a toolkit. And that toolkit includes many, many different things that we can do. One of my favorite techniques is called the 10-minute rule. So when I get distracted,
Yeah.
and meaning before the action itself, before I actually get distracted, what we want to do is to note that sensation, ideally. Okay, so I'm writing, I mean to work on this essay, or I mean to work on this big project, and I feel myself wanting to go check email for a quick minute or Google something or whatever it might be. I allow myself to give into that temptation in 10 minutes. Okay, in 10 minutes. This is the 10-minute rule. And in those 10 minutes, I have two choices. I can either get back to the task at hand, or I have to explore that sensation with curiosity rather than contempt. Okay, so many people, they're contemptuous. They either blame the technology. Oh, my iPhone did it to me. Facebook did it to me. Slack did it to me. Or they're shamers. They blame themselves. I must have a bad attention span, or I must be lazy. I must not be cut out for this. And neither of these answers are correct. Instead of becoming contemptuous, what we want to do is just be curious.
Embrace curiosity.
Exactly. And do what psychologists call surfing the urge for 10 minutes. So I'll literally pick up my phone. I'll say, set a timer for 10 minutes. I'll put it down. And now I can give in to that temptation, whether it's Googling something, or I even use this actually to eat healthy. I can give into that chocolate cake in 10 minutes. And what I do for those 10 minutes, just feel what I'm feeling. Okay. Just curiosity, not contempt. And it's amazing how when you just give yourself a little bit of space, a little bit of time, realizing what it is you're experiencing without this strict abstinence. There's this study about the white bear that, if I told you right now, whatever you do, Lou, don't think about the white bear.
I'm thinking about that bear.
Exactly. And so when we have this strict abstinence, no. Okay, fine. That actually can make the problem worse. It makes more of the internal trigger, the more of the dissatisfaction that can lead us to crave giving in even more. So instead, we just want to surf the urge, just experience that sensation. And then at the end of 10 minutes, if we still want to do that distraction, we can give in. But 9 times out of 10, there's no need for it, because you've surfed the urge, and therefore no need to get off track.
I do something similar, and I just thought about this, that at the end of every month, I have to do all my expenses and whatnot, obviously. And there's some stress around the finances every month, just because that's just natural and normal whenever, we all stress about it. And what I find is I literally will postpone or distract myself from doing those until the very last minute of what I need to. Mm-hmm. And what I've been doing of late is reminding myself how good I feel once that task is done. And I'll write it down someplace like, kicked ass, got that off the check. Remember this feeling right now. This is what you want. And I have that on a Post-it above my computer. Yeah. So that when I'm doing the expenses, I read that thing. Yep, I want to get to that point, because I know even though I'm going to be distracted and might write something I want, I know what I'm going to feel like afterwards. So kind of reframing it. Like that.
And it's really about using these 4 techniques in concert, right? It's about understanding the internal trigger, understanding why you are really getting distracted, making time for it, right? Do you have time on your calendar when you're going to do it? Removing the external triggers when you decide to do the thing that you plan to do. And then finally, you can use these packs, these pre-commitment devices, to make sure that you don't go off track. So for example, you can set what's called a price pack that says, if I don't do this tax thing, or if I don't do, balance my checkbook, whatever it might be, there's some kind of financial penalty. That's actually how I finished my book. I made a bet with my friend that if I did 4 years of research, and after 4 years of research, it was time to actually start writing the darn thing. And so I made a bet with my friend that if I don't finish my first draft by January 1st, I will pay him $10,000.
That'll do it.
Right? There's nothing you can't accomplish if you put in a high enough price on not doing it, right?
Absolutely.
And I didn't make up this technique. This actually has been shown to be the most effective technique for smoking cessation ever studied, is when people put up some skin in the game, some money. And actually, they only put up $150. And it was found to be the most effective smoking cessation program ever studied. And we're talking about something as addictive as nicotine. You're telling me that you can't use that technique to go to the gym or to finish your taxes? Of course you can. It's just whether you actually use these techniques.
Nir, let's do the admin part of the show here. Share with the listeners all the great places people can find you, websites, URLs, anything that you want to promote. This is your chance to do it. We'll provide it on the show notes, but just so you can do it.
Yeah, thank you. So my book is called Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life, and it's available wherever books are sold. And if you want, there's a bunch of free content, like a free video course, as well as an 80-page workbook. That's all available at indistractable.com.
Nir, the question at hand here is, what is your all-time favorite movie?
So my all-time favorite movie is Empire of the Sun. And most people haven't heard of this film. I think it's a fantastic film. You know what? Let me wait a minute. You can probably hear that engine, can't you?
Are you being arrested, or should we be concerned?
So
is there an emergency?
I created this little home office for myself, but this is part of living in New York. Unfortunately, these sirens are a constant distraction, shall we say?
I think one day, Nir, this is what we're going to do as a follow-up to this episode. We're going to go to Grand Central. We're going to plop down 2 chairs and a microphone and just do it right there, just to see what would happen.
It'd be about like this.
Exactly.
So there's the UN General Assembly right now, and I think that's what's
that's right.
on.
Yep.
So
a little busy.
Second. Let's wait. Okay, now.
Well, wait. Well, while we're doing that, and I want to think, by the way, a lot of people have heard of the movie Empire of the Sun. Yeah? I'm pretty sure it won Best Picture. Did it not? Like in the 80s?
I don't know. Did it? That's a good question.
I'm gonna put that in the fact check, but I believe so. That it's an amazing movie. So I want to understand why you connected with it.
So not Emperor of the Sun.
Oh, Empire of the Sun.
Empire of the Sun. Right. It's 2 different movies. Emperor of the Sun is a great movie as well, but it's not as good as Empire of the Sun.
So tell us why that movie connects with you, and I'm going to look this up.
Yeah, so first of all, it stars some pretty big names. It actually has Christian Bale as, I think he's like 12 years old in the movie. He's the star of the movie, and he is unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen that good of a child actor. And then knowing, how famous he became, pretty remarkable. So it's a great movie to watch just to see Christian Bale as a 12-year-old absolutely killing it on the screen. And then it also has John Malkovich. I'm a huge fan of his work. And it's Steven Spielberg directed it. And yet very few people. And again, it's Empire of the Sun, not Emperor of the Sun, which came out at a similar time. I think that's why not many people know about this movie. And it's basically the story of a British child who separated from his family in China when the Japanese invade during World War II, and he's rounded up into an internment camp, and it's just this story of survival and ingenuity, and it's just such a great film.
So I guess I want to know, since you've created Indistractable and this whole new word and language, Indistractable, I'll work on that.
Right.
Since you've created Indistractable, tell me, what has been your favorite Indistractable hack that you love to tell others about? You've got a bunch of them. You have a whole philosophy. The one component that still sticks out to you as your favorite part.
I think it's really about the strategy over the tactics. Tactics are what you do. Strategy is why you do it. And so it's very important to understand that difference, because, the individual life hacks and, latest thing du jour that is circulating around the internet, that kind of stuff comes and goes. My contribution is the way to think about this systematically, that you have traction, distraction, internal, external triggers. That's the most important part. Like if I can paint that picture in your mind, whether you buy the book or not, whether you use my tactics or not, that's more important, because then I'm empowering folks, I'm empowering you to find solutions for yourself that work for you in your life.
Nir Eyal, this has been a truly educational episode of Thrive Loud. I hope that our listeners were completely focused during the entire conversation, and hopefully they got to this point and they'll check everything out about you, because you got something that everybody needs, and I think that's great.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
And to our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.